second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, 59 years old, allegedly struck the woman in the face so hard she spun around while waiting in a valet line late at night after a May 2012 Cannes Film Festival event in France. DailyMail.com, coming out of the UK, but they cover American politics sometimes better than American political reporters cover American politics, has what could be a absolute blockbuster, maybe even game-changing story. It just broke about 2 hours ago. Let's get right to it. Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, forcefully slapped his ex-girlfriend for flirting with another man in a booze-fueled assault after a date to a star-studded gala. And there is the aforementioned Doug Emhoff in a photograph with the girlfriend at the time blacked out there. Now, I want you to know that we've been sitting on this story for a few hours before we began the show. We wanted to make sure that other news outlets were picking it up and going with it. We wanted to make sure that the sourcing was right. And we've decided that, this is a solid story right now based on how it's being reported. And I want to unfold it for you. It's also very important to recognize that the Daily Mail, dailymail.com, is the exact same outlet that broke the story about Doug Emhoff's babysitter, the affair that he had with his babysitter that then resulted in him paying hush money to that babysitter. And we don't know what ended up happening with the child. Some people say that there was a miscarriage. Some people say it was an abortion. We don't know. But Daily Mail broke that story about what occurred 15 years ago with Doug Emhoff, and it was rock solid. He admitted the story and came clean. We have had no comment that I know of. Kevin, have you seen anything since I've been on for the last hour and 10 minutes? We've seen nothing from the Harris campaign that I know of refuting this story as of now. So let's get to it. Daily Mail reporting, Vice President Kamala Harris's husband assaulted his ex-girlfriend. 3 friends have told DailyMail.com. The second gentleman, Doug Emhoff, 59 years old, allegedly struck the woman in the face so hard she spun around while waiting in a valet line late at night after a May 2012 Cannes Film Festival event in France. One of her friends told DailyMail.com that the woman called him immediately after the incident, sobbing in her cab, and described the alleged assault. All right, now a couple of things about this that when you're in the journalism business, as I have been for over 15 years now, there's some aspects of stories that you look for to see how valid they are. One of them, when it regards to this, is immediate contemporary corroboration, right? In other words, if you told somebody about it 8 years later, it could still be a true story, right? Because you were traumatized about it and you didn't want to say anything. But if you told somebody at the moment and that person comes forward and says, yes, this person told me at the moment that it happened, that lends more credence to the story. For instance, Christine Blasey Ford and Brett Kavanaugh, the whole story that she came up with for the confirmation hearings. There was no contemporary. In fact, I think it was like, she can't even remember what year it occurred. It allegedly occurred, Christine Blasey Ford. She can't tell you the actual location which occurred. And there's no contemporary witnesses that she told at the time that this allegation happened. There was no corroboration at all. That didn't stop Kamala Harris, of course, of making a big deal out of it at the confirmation hearings, or the media for that matter, ruining Brett Kavanaugh's life or attempting to ruin his life. But I'm just telling you that as an example. Here we've got somebody who at the moment, like within moments of this thing allegedly occurring, he says, yeah, she called me, or she says she called me. All right, let's get back to it. A second friend. So that's the first friend who says, yes, she called me immediately. DailyMail.com is not naming the woman who is a successful attorney in New York, but will refer to her by the pseudonym Jane. But let me pause there for a moment. Another pattern of behavior. Doug Emhoff has a type. Successful, powerful attorneys. He's a successful, powerful attorney. I believe his ex-wife, the one he cheated on with the babysitter, also either a successful attorney or a successful Hollywood producer and executive. Could be both. Could have been an attorney and then became a Hollywood producer. And of course, Kamala Harris, pretty successful attorney, as they met and got married when she was Attorney General of the state of California back in 2015. So he has a type. Jane apparently is that type. Second friend said Jane, who had been dating Emhoff for 3 months, also told her about the alleged violence at the time. A third friend told dailymail.com that Jane first told her in 2014, now that would be 2 years later, that's the third witness, that she had dated Emhoff and recounted the full story of his alleged abuse in 2018, excuse me. First told her in 2014 and then recounted the full story in 2018. When then Senator Harris was in the news after grilling Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh in a Senate hearing over sexual assault allegations. The friends, who all asked not to be named for fear of retaliation by Emhoff and the Democrat Party machine, their right to want to be anonymous as long as they can, shared with dailymail.com pictures of him and Jane together from 2012 and other documents and communications corroborating elements of the story. So documents corroborating elements of the story. I'm suggesting that might be other photographs showing them in Cannes together, maybe some paperwork or airline tickets or receipts from the airlines going to Cannes. The shocking claim, oh, by the way, Jane has declined to comment for the story, but that's 3 witnesses all saying that they heard this story. The shocking claims follow revelations by dailymail.com that Emhoff cheated on his first wife and mother of his 2 kids around 2008, allegedly impregnating his daughter's nanny, who also worked as her grade school teacher. Emhoff admitted the affair with the nanny and teacher, Najine Naylor, after dailymail.com published the story last month. So this is coming from the same publication that published that story that he eventually admitted to. All 3 of Jane's friends said she also told them about a disturbing alleged incident during her relationship with the second gentleman, in which Emhoff nonchalantly admitted to impregnating Naylor. Emhoff told Jane that the nanny accused him of causing her to have a miscarriage, the friends claimed. That's a fascinating little nugget, isn't it? According to the friends, Emhoff did not say how he was allegedly responsible for the miscarriage, and he told Jane that the nanny's claims were false. But the second gentleman allegedly confessed to Jane that he paid Naylor a settlement of around $80,000 and had the nanny sign a non-disclosure agreement. Oh, I'm sorry. On this program, we no longer call those non-disclosure agreements because we've learned from how the mainstream media covered the Donald Trump Stormy Daniels story. It's not a non-disclosure agreement. No, it's hush money. He paid her hush money. In fact, now that his wife is running for president, this may be worthy of a criminal investigation because that hush money that he paid, that $80,000, that could be a criminal act to try to circumvent campaign finance laws, right? Right? Isn't that how this game is played? All right, so now let's get to the sourcing on this story. Josh Boswell is one of the reporters from the Daily Mail. Kamala Harris's husband, Doug Emhoff, assaulted his ex-girlfriend. 3 of her friends told me. Here are some key details for my full story. Let's look at this together. They were at a celebrity event in France in 2012 in public, and he slapped her in the face so hard she spun around, the friend said. And yes, this is not a joke. This is not the Babylon Bee. Harvey Weinstein was featured at this Amfar fundraiser at Cannes, where the physical abuse is alleged to have happened. You can't make this up. The ex, who we're calling Jane, tried to get away in a cab, but Doug forced his way in. Jane, a successful New York lawyer, immediately called a friend from the car, told him what happened. She told a second friend contemporaneously, too. I spoke to both friends. They provided photos, messages, and documents that help corroborate their story. Okay, let's take a look. Here's a email dated May 2012. Hi, sweetie. We weren't staying at the Negresco because the rooms they still had available were uber expensive. However, I was able to book a room at the Concord, which is just a couple blocks down from the same street. The Negresco is at 37 Promenade d'Angers, and the Concord is 13 Promenade d'Angers. That's Street of the Angels, right? Anglais, excuse me, Anglais. I've also attached our itinerary. Unfortunately, we have to leave a day early than you so that Doug can be back in LA for his daughter's birthday. Boy, it's a jet setting, high flying sort of lifestyle, isn't it? But so there's a email from the alleged Jane to this person at the time talking about what hotels in Cannes they stayed in. Here's an American Express travel receipt of Doug Emhoff, travel arrangements made for Doug Emhoff as well as Jane, whose name is blacked out. It shows the flights on Scandinavian Airlines for this Cannes festival. There's the picture that we mentioned with the person's face shielded for privacy purposes. They say Doug was nonchalant the next day and pretended it was no big deal, which is also sort of frightening, but also if you know people who have been victims of physical abuse like this, it's not uncommon for the abuser to act like, what, it's no big deal. Nothing happened. Nothing happened. What are you talking about? Very rarely is the abuser, oh my God, I'm so sorry. I can't believe I did that. I just lost my head, like they are in the movies, right? No, oftentimes the abusers act like there's nothing wrong. And if you have a problem, if you want to complain about what happened, you're the problem. It's your fault, right? They said Jane and Doug met on Match.com. Boy, let that be a lesson, everybody. Doug love bombed her. He brought his son on the first date. He flew her out to LA and was talking about marriage and kids after just a month, they said. Well, he was clearly looking for a high-powered attorney to marry because 3 years later, that's exactly what he did with the then Attorney General of California, Kamala Harris. Jane asked Doug about his ongoing divorce from Kirsten Emhoff. He allegedly confessed they split because he impregnated his daughter's elementary school teacher, nanny, babysitter. That's the nanny I broke the story about in August. There you go. That's that story. Doug suggested to Jane that the nanny, Najen Naylor, was lying, the friend said, but when I broke the story about the nanny in August, other sources close to Najen told me that she was indeed pregnant and didn't keep the baby. I repeatedly asked Doug's White House representative and Kamala's press team for comment about the alleged assault. They were silent, just like in August when I broke the story about the nanny, which Doug admitted hours later. I hope others in the media ask them about this. We know the New York Post picked up this story. We have picked up this story. It should be getting more coverage now, but it's the kind of thing that people are sort of like, do you want to go near this? Is it true? Is it not? That's some pretty solid reporting. Unlike the reporter, I'm not going to say this happened. I'm going to say that the Daily Mail is reporting that it's happened and that corroborated witnesses at the time say that it happened. And that's as far as we'll go with it, but it's a hell of a story, especially in light of the narrative that's been built around Doug Emhoff. Kamala Harris, by the way, talk about tweets that come back to haunt you. I wore black today in support of all survivors of sexual assault or abuse. We won't let them be silenced or ignored. I mean, just look at the concern on her face. We will not let abuse victims be silent or ignored. Hashtag believe survivors. Well, should we believe all survivors, Madam Vice President? Even the ones who are accusing your husband? I mean, that's the bar that's been set, right? Those are the rules that have been determined. Believe all women. Believe all survivors. No questions asked. That's what they tried to do. That's what she tried to do to Brett Kavanaugh. And a story that was way flimsier without any corroboration, contemporary corroboration at the time. But as far as she was concerned, hashtag me too, hashtag believe all women, hashtag believe all survivors. There she is, believe survivors. Does that mean her husband's survivor as well? Meanwhile, our buddy Comfortably Smug points out that in 2021, Tim Walsh proclaimed October to be Domestic Violence Awareness Month. There's the proclamation. There's his scrawl. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And if you check the calendar, it's October 2nd. So we're right in the thick of it. So far, still no comment from the Harris-Walz campaign. But Doug Emhoff has spoken out about such things, sort of. Last year, in an interview with MSNBC, he had a lot to say about men.
Let's talk about masculinity for a moment. Has being second gentleman changed your own view of perceived gender roles or what it means to be a man?
This is something I've thought about a lot and something I've spoken about a lot. There's too much of toxicity, it's masculine toxicity out there, and we've kind of confused what it means to be a man, what it means to be masculine, where you've got this trope out there that you've got to be tough and, angry and lash out to be strong. It's just the opposite. Strength is how you show your love for people. Strength is how you are for people and how you have their back and how you stick up for other people and pushing out against bullies. I mean, that's what I believe it is. So every time I can speak against this toxicity. We're seeing it with our younger people. We're seeing it in our discourse and our politics, in the media. You're seeing it as it relates to so many of the issues that we're pushing back on. So I think it's a problem, and I'm going to continue to use this platform every time I get to speak out against this toxic masculinity that's out there.
Toxic masculinity. Boy, what a revealing answer that is. So again, let's watch it one more time with the knowledge now that this man is now being very credibly accused of assaulting his girlfriend in public at a valet parking stand in Cannes, France, smacking her so hard in the face that it made her turn around because he was angry that she was allegedly flirting with another man.
Much of toxicity, it's masculine toxicity out there. And we've kind of confused what it means to be a man, what it means to be masculine, where you've got this trope out there that you've got to be tough and, angry and lash out to be strong. It's just the opposite.
I want you to just for a moment, assuming this story is true and it is incredibly well reported, imagine being this woman. Imagine being Jane, as Daily Mail is calling her, and watching this, knowing who this is, knowing what he's done to you. And here he is, being treated like, he's the greatest man. He's so sensitive. And he's pushing back on that brute force, toxic masculinity. And it's about time that men have to stop behaving badly. And imagine how she's being abused all over again by this guy. Maybe I fool myself. I've never been in this guy's position in any way whatsoever. I've never laid a hand on a woman in this way, in any way, I should say, other than with affection and love. And I've certainly never been so high profile that in some way I'm being held up as some sort of new model of masculinity. But I got to tell you, if I'm Doug Emhoff and I'm asked that question, I would say, listen, I'm just a husband. I've already been through one failed marriage. I'm on my second marriage. I'm doing my best to support my wife right now, but I'm not perfect. I make a lot of mistakes. I've made a lot of mistakes. God help me. I pray to God every day that I'm the best man that I can be that day for my children and for my wife. And that's the best I can hope for. So if you want some sort of grand lessons on masculinity and how to be a man, don't ask me, because that's not what I signed up for here. That's how a man with humility answers the question. That's how a man with self-awareness answers that question. That's how a man who is humble before the Lord answers that question. But instead, we get this Doug Emhoff from just 3 days ago.
Important part, or an interesting part of how people have talked about your role here is how your role has reshaped the perception of masculinity. And I'm not sure you planned on that, but you are an incredibly supportive spouse. Has that been an evolution for you? And do you think that's part of the role you might play as first gentleman?
It's funny. I've started to think a lot about this. I've always been like this. My dad was like this. And to me, it's the...
I can't no more. Enough. She's reshaped masculinity in her own way. Sorry, Doug. You don't get to do the victory lap and get all the praise and all the hero worship for reshaping and redefining masculinity and speaking out against toxic masculinity just because you happen to, 9 years ago, marry the Attorney General of the United States, then Senator, now Vice President, and you're hoping to be president. I'm sorry. That doesn't suddenly mean that you have reshaped masculinity and that you are in some way an expert on the case, especially considering what we already know you've done in the past to your wife and to your children and to that poor innocent babysitter. I mean, no wonder you're such a proponent of abortion. No wonder you are so enthusiastic about making abortion as legal as possible, because Lord knows you want to clean up your messes that you've created in your past. So you don't get to have it both ways. You don't get to celebrate how you've reshaped masculinity after what you did to that poor girl. And now, in light of these new allegations that appear to be incredibly well-sourced and corroborated by Daily Mail and other news agencies now that are jumping on it, The last thing we need is lectures from you about how to be a man. And Capehart and Jen Psaki and MSNBC and everyone else who has been jumping on board this thing for the last couple of months. Boy, they should be, well, I'd say they should be ashamed of themselves, but that would require them to have any level of shame at all.